One thing about gardening is there's a lot of things that we can do right, but there is also a lot of things we can do wrong. So I kind of want to highlight the mistakes, the top mistakes that we make in our gardens. At any time during this video, if I am making that mistake, I'm guilty of it, I will absolutely tell you. And if you do the same, leave us a comment below and we'll see if we can't fix these issues. All right, so let's do an easy one first. So this is something I hate doing, so I'm absolutely guilty of it. And we'll show you right here. This is simply weeding. So weeding is not just a looks thing. And I know you're thinking, oh, well, that's a give me. But I mean, it does a lot of things to your garden. The top 3 things that it does for your garden is having too many weeds in your garden will compete for water, compete for nutrients, and compete for root space. And if you add all those together, you kind of got a recipe for a disaster. I'm trying this year myself to be better about it. I'm trying to come out, I don't know, once a week or so and give it a weeding. The method that I've been doing to get on top of this recently is I'll come out like this bed right here is not too bad. I've been really trying to keep up with the middle of this bed because we do want to plant it. But before we put on our mulch, before we do anything different, we try to come out and we just give it a good weeding and get on top of it. Now, I've got some pretty stubborn weeds. Look, I'm not special. I know we all got stubborn weeds, but the weeds I'm dealing with this year, you can see this grass here is very stubborn and it spreads by rhizome, so it's hard to get out. So basically, I've got to continuously, see that, look. Every once in a while you get lucky. And that was like pulling the piece of plastic off of electronic when you get it, you know, that was, whew, that was satisfying. It's helping because I come out here and, you know, I planted this bed and I completely weeded it. I came back and I weeded it again and then it took over, and this isn't too bad for what was growing under the canopy. So now that it's starting, we haven't harvested the potatoes yet, but we will come out and we'll probably weed this at some point in the near future. And if I get a good weeding in before I get the mulch in, and then I put the mulch on top, it still isn't perfect, but it's a lot better. So I'm learning that the hard way. Now let me give you a tip that I learned a long time ago. Don't just throw weeds on top of your mulch and expect it to drown it out. What you're gonna get is explosive weed growth. I don't even need to tell you how I know that. Other thing a lot of people do too much, or they do make a mistake in their gardens, they do too much trimming. So the garden is, yeah, you do have to trim it from time to time. You know, I bring you over to my determinate tomatoes. I keep getting them confused. These are determinate tomatoes, and we don't really want to trim these too much, right? We want to manage them, but we don't really want to trim them too much. And so what I do for these specifically is I trim the bottom 6 inches. Come over here and show you. So I trim down low so there's some airflow that can get in, and I may need to come top that off again. Just clear that up a little bit. But once we get up a little bit higher, I don't do too much more. It's not just tomatoes, okay? That's just like an easy one. A lot of people want a single stem and stuff like that. Whatever. You know, we come to our squashes. The bed is buck wild right now. And so a lot of people would want to come in and trim it. Now, the only thing that I trim in my squash bed is highly damaged leaves. Like this one's pretty borderline. It got hit by something pretty good. So we'll take that leaf out, and then we'll take this little squash beetle, get rid of him. And then we'll come through and just look for, we don't have a whole lot of dead leaves going on here. Highly damaged leaves, you know, we might take this one out. And we'll do one wide swoop all the way through. So we'll do all at once. You don't want to do a little bit at a time. Now this goes for a lot of plants. You know, you don't really want to come out and say, okay, I'm going to trim on Monday. And then be like, let me trim again. You know, you want to come out and just have a plan, let that plant bush, grow, and then cut it back. And then that's going to make a big difference, because every time you trim it, you're causing stress. And every time you cause stress, you're slowing growth. So we do want to keep it managed and keep it going in the right direction, but at the same time, you don't want to do it all the time. And some plants just don't need to be trimmed. For instance, sweet potatoes that you can hardly see right now, they won't get trimmed at all. The only time they get trimmed is I get a deer that comes through about once a year and he'll clean the tops off. Somebody did send me a picture of that deer last year, so I got a timestamp and a date. And if he's out there around that date. And the other thing is, once this bed fills up and they start to come out and over heavily, we may call it, at some point, I may look at it and say, all right, we're gonna let our vines come to right here. And then we'll just run over them with a lawnmower here, but we don't trim them at all. Yes, I know you can eat sweet potato leaves and they are tasty, but I want my sweet potatoes, I don't want the leaves. I got plenty of leaves I can eat, so, you know, just pare down on your trimming. And just know that there's trimming to be done, but it's not a crazy amount. Some plants that I never ever trim after they're planted, never trim my peppers. So you can see, here's our more developed peppers. These don't ever get trimmed unless there is significant damage. I don't trim, I may trim about a couple inches off the bottom of this eggplant here, not much. Not worried about it too much. I don't really trim the squash. I don't trim, the only time I trim my green beans is if they're getting out of control and I want them shorter. Other than that, I don't. And the same with my butternut squash and my Seminole pumpkins, which are just seedlings right now. They will get trimmed if they get too big. But look, if you watched this last year, too big was what? The squash went over the trellis, out the yard, through here, back through, into the bed, and I still didn't trim it, so clearly I don't trim it. I like to think I do though. Carrots and all that stuff, never ever trim them. So just be careful about your trimming. All right, another one which kind of goes in conjunction with the trimming is simply just doing too much in your garden. You know, and we did the whole video about overcomplicating it, and a lot of people took that as being lazy. So just relax, right? We don't need 58 kinds of fertilizer. We don't need 32 different tools. We don't need, you know, 18 ingredients for our soil. We don't need that stuff. You know, it's a pretty simple, basically ancient technique that we're doing here. We're growing food, and so we don't really need a whole lot. You know, once this bed started to get to the position that it's in, we gave it a good weeding, and then we basically left it behind. We can't really do anything to this bed, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of filled up. You know, when we did this, we basically just amended it, fertilized it, and planted it. And when I amended it, I just put in simply topsoil right on top of the soil. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less, just topsoil. You know, and a lot of these beds, they all get topsoil. Some of them may get 50% topsoil, 50% compost, but for the most part, we just keep it really simple. And that's the whole plan here, because once you get in here and you start tinkering with this soil and you start doing all these different things, what you do is you mess up the chemistry in your soil, which can have unforeseen consequences. Start putting a bunch of different additives in, you may not even, and first of all, you need to know what your soil chemistry is before you do that. But let's say you didn't, and you come through and you do that, then you're kind of chasing your tail for, you know, it could be years at that point. So, you know, I know people go on social media and it's really catchy. This one simple ingredient does everything for you, you know, but it's like, sometimes you just don't need that stuff. And it's just, I find that if we keep it simple, we do our jobs, we manage our gardens, it doesn't make a hill of beans what you do in your garden. So you don't want to be fussing with your plants all the time. You don't want to be fertilizing them all the time. You don't want to be, you know, watering them constantly and all that stuff. We just want to maintain the garden, and just try to keep it really, really simple. I just did that video about fertilizing, and you know, I went on to say, like, yeah, it sounds like I have a lot of ingredients, but really they don't all get used at once. They all have different purposes, and there was only like 4, maybe 5 at the most. So, you know, we don't put in green sands and all these different clays and stuff like that. It's just, we try to keep it so it's managed and it's easy, and it's something that we can keep up with every year, with, on top of that, ingredients that we can easily get that aren't disappearing from us from the stores and stuff like that, because that's a nightmare when you get used to something and then all of a sudden you can't find it. We don't want that to happen. You can take things and make them as complicated as you want. Take, for instance, this corn bed. This year I'm trying something new where I'm going to put a cover crop in the middle, which is almost time to plant, and get that going. But you know, you can make it as complicated or as easy as you want. And I will say this though, you make it as easy as you want, then it's probably going to be more enjoyable. You'll probably have more harvest coming out of it, because the more that we add and do stuff, it just, again, it adds stress to the plants, adds stress to the soil, all that good stuff. So the tips and tricks side of everything, you know, when it comes down to gardening, it's basic concepts. And I think it's really important to hammer home and really understand your basic concepts, and then you're going to be going in the right direction in your garden. But we got 2 more. One of them is super simple, we just talked about it, but the other one is the most important one for all of this. And just for the record, I know I didn't say recently about any of these, but I have been guilty of overcomplicating it, and I have spent the past few years really simplifying my gardening techniques. You kind of probably, if I'm lucky enough that you've been watching me from the very beginning, which I'm sorry if you did, but you can probably see throughout the years how I've simplified it a little bit more and a little bit more, at the same time growing my garden. And that's what has allowed me to grow my garden to what I think is probably the biggest size that I want at this point. So that's really helped. As far as not weeding, yeah, I've already said that, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but oh, the trimming. And trimming has been something too that has been a real challenge, because I find that I constantly want to get into the garden and do stuff. So yeah, trimming is tough, but I've gotten a lot better about it, and it's made it a lot easier. So a couple years ago, I did the whole, I trim my tomatoes once and I'm done. And that really worked out well for me. 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe 3 years as well, I started doing the squash, just trimming and being done. And really what I was doing is I noticed that I was focusing on trying to make more space. And so I decided that instead of trying to make more space, just give them more space. All right, so the next one we've just talked about recently, so we're not gonna camp on it very long at all. And that's gonna be just underwatering your garden. It's pretty simple concept. I just did a video about all that stuff, so go back and watch it. I can't remember which one, it was like 2 videos ago or something. Go back and watch that, and you'll get the gist of what I feel about that and how I overcome it and stuff like that. So underwatering is a big mistake to avoid, and a lot of people do it. I think more people than we like to admit actually do that. So just be careful of that. All right, last but absolutely not least, and most importantly, not having a solid plan. Now hold on, I get it. But look, having a solid plan is like, you're like, oh, okay, I already planned it, I didn't have a plan, I'm screwed. No, you can still change that and you can amend it, but we need to have a good, solid base plan, because every year I strive to have a solid plan into my garden, and every year I end up changing something. But that's the joy and the point of gardening, is to be able to change something when you see the need, to be able to identify a change that has happened and think to yourself, this isn't working, how can I fix it? And still within the time frame, because you're basically on a deadline to get something to produce. So, you know, you look around, and I know I've talked about it to death, but these 3 beds here, are all part of that. You know, they were a solid plan. And so we did have to change the plan. But what ended up happening is, even though we changed the actual space, so the corn went here instead of back here, the tomatoes went there instead of here, what happened was we kept everything that was supposed to be in the beds together. And so that's really your good base solid plan, or at least in my book it is. Meaning these are the plants that are planted together. They were intended to be together and they stayed together. Even though their space changed, which if you don't know why, that makes such a big difference, is because of my crop rotation that I do. It's just how I manage it in my garden. But you go to other beds, you know, I've got 2 other beds here that really, the plan was kind of up in the air about it. The jury's still out. This one's coming along. As you can see, we have germination on everything that we put in here. So we've got crimson watermelon, we've got hearts of gold cantaloupe, and we got straight 8 cucumbers in the back. This was a bed that I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it, and I had this in mind, but this one was just kind of like a toss-up. We didn't really know at all what we wanted. So we were able to get this one put together, and the same with this bed over here. So this one kind of threw us for a loop this year as well, because we made some changes to the garden. So, you know, we knew we wanted to put these on the back row, so that was like our anchor point. But then after that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do here, and we'll see how this goes. But it looks like it's gonna work out pretty good. We got our beans, and our bush beans in the front, and then we've got our peppers in the middle. And that was kind of, this bed right here is just kind of like a whatever bed. You know, we know that the bush beans are gonna produce. That's fine, they're not gonna last forever. But when they do give out, if these peppers aren't doing well because we had tomatoes in here last year, then we can pull it all up and just leave these on the trellis like we had originally planned. But if you have yourself a handful of beds and you're like, I don't know what I'm putting in there, I just know I'm gonna go get plants and go for it, you're almost setting yourself up for disaster early on. So try to avoid that mistake. It's something that I don't understand. Well, I do understand, because I was pretty bad about that in the beginning as well. But as we started going on and deeper into it, and I started to enjoy gardening more and really embrace it, I found that the winter season gave me so much time to do this that I just ended up doing it, and it really made a big difference. So make sure that you are building a solid plan, and if you need to amend it, relax and change it. It's okay. But we have a fall season coming up shortly, which I know nobody wants to hear about, but you know, here in about a month, we got to really seriously start talking about getting ready for fall. And there's a lot of things to do about it, but that's like your second chance to have a solid plan. So try to work on that, and don't let yourself fall into that category, because this is the one thing that will totally change your garden and really make it so you have a more enjoyable time. But don't fall victim to these 5 other things. So let us know. Have you made any of these mistakes? Because Lord knows I have. Good.